Hi there, Johnny Hugill here, Head of Research at Public. And this morning we've spoken a lot about transformation, and I think the key thing is that governments have had to adapt quickly. And we're very lucky that this morning we have three of those people who have, in many different ways, been leading that charge of European governments adapting and changing. And we've seen in all facets of government, we've seen massive and often unprecedented changes in how government performs procurement, in how government introduces new funding and stimulus, in how government is implementing new policy, and sometimes even in how government is introducing new law. And today, we'll be talking and really drilling into each of these topics. First, we'll be speaking a bit about how data is being used to create more responsive and adaptive governments. We'll be talking a bit about some of the different governance models, how this differs from gemeenten in the Netherlands and arrondissement in France, and even at the European Union level. We'll be speaking a bit about citizen engagement and how we really make sure that we have buy-in and consultation throughout. And most importantly of all, we'll be looking at whether we think this will be a systematic change in how governments operate around Europe. So we're really lucky today to be joined by some amazing guests. We have Minister Amélie de Montchalin from France, the Minister of Public Transformation and Civil Service. We have State Secretary Raymond Knops, State Secretary of the Ministry of Interior and Kingdom Relations in the Netherlands, who amongst other things have been leading the work on GovTech in the Netherlands. And we have Mark Greenaway, who heads up Northern Europe Enterprise for Adobe. I think, given that we're so lucky to have such amazing speakers, it would be great to hear from Minister Amélie de Montchalin and second from Minister Knops a bit about how their country has been adapting and changing, and how they're seeing data become a more central part of decision making and governance in these really challenging times. Minister de Montchalin, it would be great to hear from you.
Good morning to all, and thank you for the invitation. First of all, the way our government adapted, it does creating my job. I was appointed 6th of July, so after a reshuffle that happened after this first phase of COVID. And so it was created, this new ministry for public transformation and civil service, joining three bricks, to actually achieve a more ambitious transformation agenda. I'm therefore in charge of HR for the public administration, so the people, how they work, what are the tools they have, and how also they relate to data as a new way to conceive and then deploy public policies. Second, I'm in charge of transforming the processes of the French administration, how we make sure that in the design of a new policy, in the way also include feedbacks of citizens, we can change the way we design policies. And I'm also in charge of digital transformation, which for the first time is linked to the HR of our country, showing that we need people and new tools, modern tools, digital tools to achieve our transformation agenda. So I'm putting under a same roof three dimensions that before were existing in our administration, but were not led with a single view and a single agenda. So that's the first thing we've done to speed up our transformation agenda and how we put data at the center of policymaking in the 21st century by joining these three blocks. The second thing I was willing to share in these opening remarks is to think about the moment we're in and to make sure that we don't have this discussion as if it was happening 6 months ago or in 6 months. The very moment we're in shows that we need to rebuild confidence and trust, because citizens have been undergoing a very challenging time. We've asked many of them to stay home. We've asked many of them to work differently, to relate differently to public service, but to keep going, to have their lives, to continue to think of projects, and to think about their training, to think about how they want to grow their family, and so on. The moment is the one where we need to show proofs of love, proofs of consideration, proofs of efficiency. And therefore, we need to go much, much faster to rebuild a more user-friendly and a closer public service. What we've seen during the lockdown, that people were willing to have more efficiency, and we can understand why, but they were also willing to have people closer to them, And this feeling of a state of a public service being discussed or decided very far away, not only geographically, but also in terms of hierarchies, has been something that people were feeling very aggressive vis-à-vis their own lives and own projects. Therefore, we are undergoing three main projects now inside our government. One is digitalization, to smooth out the processes for people to feel that we are able to personalize what we do with them. Also to have this principle of just tell me once, to stop asking people again and again the same information, the same data, to ask for them to produce documents that were produced by another administration. So this data as a tool to make things easier and closer, and as we give the impression, but not only the impression, the reality that we know the people with whom we are exchanging as an administration. The second agenda is to invest, to go much faster in a number of projects. So in the recovery package of 100 billion that was presented a few weeks ago, my ministry has 1 billion investment to digitalize and go much, much faster. This is not equipment I'm talking about. This is really the tools for digitalization of the different interactions we have with the citizens. And the third is that we have to understand that going digital is not the only job of the administration. We need with us civil society, we need with us journalists, we need elected officials locally, because data is not something you put out in the field and you think by definition people will understand how to use it and why we should trust this more data-driven policy making. Our third agenda is really to create coalition, cooperation beyond the borders and the borders of the state in itself. Just to conclude, and we had a discussion with Raymond yesterday, I feel both an appetite for more modern, more data-driven, more digital government services, but also a key question. Are we sure it works? Are we sure that for the money you're spending in it, we will feel better after these changes? Are we sure that it will not put people feeling even more isolated while we are trying instead to put them closer to us and to personalize the services we're providing? And this trust question, are we sure that we need friends in a way, which are not civil servants and not the state? We need civil society, we need NGOs, we need elected officials, we need voices in the debate, which are not us. And data-driven policy making cannot just be a project for the government. It should be a project for all of those who can benefit from this closer, simpler, and more efficient policy making.
Absolutely fascinating, and totally agree. I think we often hear, as you said, talking about data-driven policymaking and transformation in efficiency terms. I've never heard before the fact that better and more responsive digital services can make people feel more loved and more trusted. But that's a really interesting framework. Minister Knops, over to you. Kind of same question, and again thinking about how have you got that balance right between efficiency, speed, but also, as Minister de Montchalin said, making people trust government and maybe even feel kind of loved and known by their government services?
Well, I think we have a lot of similarities with France. And yes, we had a good and fruitful discussion yesterday. And it was also all about the question, what can we do together to deliver the proper services to our people, to safeguard fundamental rights, and to gain trust again. Because a lack of modern democracies is that a lot of people can get their information from everywhere, but nobody is sure whether this information is right. So the problem of disinformation is very big. And that is one of the reasons that we put a lot of efforts as the Dutch government in fighting disinformation, but also to prove our citizens that our services can be trusted. And therefore you have to work with open source, you have to be transparent in what you do, and that in a very highly technological environment. So these are real challenges for government. And if we look back at the times we're in now, these are very challenging times as well. Not only for the government, but for every single citizen. The question, how will our country look like tomorrow or in a few months? What will it do with my job, with the way I work, with my family? Do I have a job? So there's a lot of uncertainty in society, and a lot of people are looking to the governments to give answers to their questions. And the honest answer is that we can't answer all the questions right now, because the situation is too complex and it's hardly predictable what's going to happen with the COVID-19 crisis. What we have seen, however, is that in the last months, the pace of, let's say, digitalization in our country has becoming higher and higher. You don't have to explain to people what's the essence of digitalization and how it can help you, especially in these hard times, to go on. So as European countries, we should act together and to work closely towards these challenges. And I find it personally, I was in office already before COVID arose. And nevertheless, the Dutch government said 3 years ago in the government agreement that digitalization and let's say the focus on working together and to deliver more and better services has to be sharpened. And that's the reason that one of the ministers, state secretaries, is now responsible for digital government. We are not right now at the phase where France is in, but I predict that in a new Dutch government, we have elections next year, there also will be somebody who has more power and more coordinating authorities, because everybody sees that we are going very, very fast. And I took 3 lessons out of this COVID-19 crisis. First of all, and I'm a former military, leave no man/women behind. We have 2.5 million people, about 15% of our population, which has difficulties with going digital. They are illiterated or they have other problems, but we should not leave them behind. So unlike the movement towards more digital government, there are still a lot of people in our society that need to be helped in another way, in an analog way. So we have to prepare them with skills. We have to improve our education. We have to bring them in, because there's no other way than going digital. That's how the world develops. Secondly, the second lesson is we need to be part as a government of a spearhead innovation group in order to use the full potential of digitalization. We work closely together with private companies, with NGOs, because their customers are our citizens. They are the same people, and we have the same challenges to bring them in, to make our society more inclusive. And if you make your society more inclusive, when you make it more inclusive, you will also gain trust, because when people don't understand what's happening, they will develop distrust. And for example, one of the things we do is to participate in the Dutch blockchain coalition, and also in the Netherlands Artificial Intelligence Coalition as a government. We want to be in the front row, in the front group. We want to learn from them and they can learn from us. And we are not competitors, so we can easily work together. Private, public, I really hope it will work together more closely in the near future. Third lesson, finally, is that we have to follow a human approach. Focused on the people, and it means that technology must be developed in a way that fundamental rights are safeguarded and that services are customized to the people's needs. And they have also the ability or the power to empower their own data, and control their own data. So when you put the citizens in the first position, then you will see that your policy has to follow on that principle. So I think that, especially in this time, we have a lot of opportunities we can use. Work together more closely with the private sector, with NGOs, with neighboring countries, like we are going to do with France and Belgium and Germany and so But also these initiatives like the GovTech Summit can contribute to that positive development. Thank you.
Great. Thanks so much for that. And you're totally right that one of the most important things we can do is bring together all of the different stakeholders who can add value to this effort jointly. Mark, we've heard a lot both from Minister de Montchalin and Minister Knops on making services usable, accessible, making users sort of feel respected and even loved when they're using services. I suppose this is something that Adobe and any software company really has to sort of grapple with every day. I wonder if you have any thoughts on making services as usable and kind of citizen friendly as possible.
Yeah, very much so, and thanks to the GovTech Summit. Thanks for the opportunity to take part. And I just want to talk a little bit about the experience Adobe's had through this time and what we've been focusing on. Then maybe refer back to a couple of points that the ministers have made. In Adobe, we focus on helping organizations and helping governments deliver consumer and citizen experiences, create and deliver those experiences. At the start of the pandemic, I mean, we moved really fast to offer services to European governments and governments worldwide and education free of charge in order to assist with the rapid transformation needed. The pandemic meant that digital was essential to continue to deliver many services. So, we saw three things that really helped organizations take advantage of what we were doing. One was organizations that were willing to move very fast within governments and perhaps had innovative ways of deploying or procuring technology. Organizations that were already considering transformation in many ways, considering ways of taking paper processes digital or in-person services online in some way. And we saw that those organizations were better able to adapt and move faster. And speed, as Tony Blair was referring to earlier, was really everything in many cases. And the third thing we saw that really helped was partnerships. And it was partnerships, as both the ministers referred to, with public sector, private sector. We saw partnerships within the public sector really quite as well. So, for example, UK Police Information Commissioners Trust, which supports all of the regional police forces within the UK, were able to move to provide electronic signature capability to many of those forces and accelerate the deployment of that technology in order to provide remote witness statements and remove the need for in-person visits, for example. And then we also saw the public and private sector partnerships as being really important. For example, with the emergency finance, which so many countries enabled via banks, and we saw banks in the UK and in other markets moving very quickly to deliver rapid digital application processes, often on mobile as well, for small businesses and all businesses to apply for finance. I think the one thing which should be of reassurance to both the ministers when we're talking about public trust, Adobe's just completed a little bit of research with WPP in partnership, and the indications coming back from that research across thousands of citizens across several countries is that public trust is improved by great digital experiences. Public trust is improved, and there are many aspects to that. And Minister de Montchalin has referred to transformation of people as well within government and upskilling and enabling. And Minister Knops has talked about data and being responsible and efficient in capturing data. All those things are very important, but the fundamental thing is that our research indicates that the better the digital experience for the citizen, the more trust they will have in the government, and the more services they wish to go online as well.
Really fascinating. On that note, Minister de Montchalin, we heard earlier that sometimes governments governments have become even more important in our lives than ever before, but also sometimes governments have to sort of have the humility to be clear that they don't always know the answer and that things might look uncertain and often even for months at a time. I wonder, in your you've grappled with that and how you've managed to gain and protect citizen trust, but also be honest with them and tell them that sometimes government doesn't have all the answers and is learning as it goes as well.
I think your question is a very good link to what both Raymond and Mark said. We said we want to be data-driven, but first of all, we have to be user-driven. And I think what Raymond said about those who can feel left behind by solutions, which are not extremely user-centric or efficient, is a key question. So yes, data-driven policy making can be more efficient, provided it's user-centric and it's user-driven. And when you say, how do we say we don't know everything? There are, for me, three ideas to be thought about. One, we need to work with people which are at the top of the leadership in technology and user experience, which are most often startups, which are able to solve a pain point in a very smart and smooth and satisfying way. And during the crisis, we worked pro bono sometimes, but also more structurally with startups to design protective equipment for hospitals, also to work on an online FAQ, which was easy to understand for people when the instructions were quite difficult to understand. We also worked with another startup also to have the instructions made in a way people can all understand, even though they are not extremely literate. So yes, first we need to agree on the point that others can solve our pain points in a much more efficient way than we do. Second is we lack skills and development skills and tech skills inside government to be then able to speak with the outside world. And sometimes we just don't know because we don't know that a solution exists somewhere. I'm not saying that I want to insource everything. I think we need to keep a very vibrant startup ecosystem around ourselves, but we also need people inside which are able to really explain with the same words, with the same vocabulary, and to have this exchange on a equal basis. I think startups will be much more interested to work with the state if the state can talk to them in a way they can relate to. And this is why we need to hire people able also to challenge us internally, saying you are having this great project, which is spending millions and millions, but in fact, I know somebody who can help both going much faster and being more satisfactory for the people. The third way is we have to be cautious, and I link there to Raymond, that sometimes 100% digital, because we thought we had the solution, is not a solution. We have to keep what I call hybrid solution, that the same policy can be both accessed by an online or a digital or an app, but also in physical places, or by phone, where you can have a human-to-human relationship. And understanding that we don't know everything also means that we should both have an objective, which is to be modern, fast, agile, efficient, data-driven, to personalize, to consider people differently. And I use the word love, but I think the key word is consideration. We relate to people which need a personalized service, but we cannot just have the impression that transformation is a black and white process. This hybrid solution of policy making, of services to be provided, for me is essential. This is why in France, just to conclude, at the moment we're doing two things. We're doing both a very, very strong, effort on going digital for many of our relationship with the citizens, but at the same time, we're investing to have 2,000 single house access points to public services where you can do the online processes while having a support and while having a human-to-human contact. Because we cannot just let the whole country going digital without training. And this goes for the people in public service, which need to be trained, but also the citizens, and which we need to provide solutions which are efficient. And related to startups, I really think they can be those who tell us, well, you thought you managed and performed, you could do it in a different way, and we can help you. But we need those inside government able to talk to them on a daily basis.
Totally agree. And you're right. It's all about having those translators almost on the inside who can connect great innovation with concrete policy needs. Completely agree. Minister Knops, before you leave us, I just want to ask you, in your view, are the changes, the positive changes we've seen in responsiveness and adaptiveness, do you think those they're here to stay? For instance, we can't rely on pro bono work from Adobe and software providers forever. Do you think we have a sustainable change that will last beyond this crisis?
Absolutely. I'm very much convinced that we have learned a lot. We are in that big social experiment all together. So everybody has its own experiences, how it works and how it can be improved. So this will be, I'm convinced, an accelerator in the process we have gone through so far, and it will stay, absolutely. Also for other reasons, because we have learned and experienced how we can work more efficient. We are more. We deal better with the time restraints and constraints we always have, and especially what Amélie said about the working together with the startup society. It's for us very interesting to see how they use skills to solve societal problems, for example. And that's the reason we initiated our Startup in Residence program to find solutions for societal challenges. So also in this way, you see that the private sector and often very young startups is helping the government with solving societal problems. And so we can help each other. And what I said before, a customer is at the same time a citizen, and we have to deal with them from the same perspective. We are very much aligned already with France, because we also set up some information points, access points in the libraries, where people can go digital with help of real human beings. So that can help them to step over the hindrances they've experienced so far, and they can also become digital in the near future. So I'm very positive. Of course, the disease and the pandemic, it's awful, and people who have to deal with it, they suffer a lot. But as a society, as a country, as a government, we can learn a lot from these times.
Brilliant. And you mentioned Startup in Residence there, and that continues to be a model around Europe for how startups can work with government. A really positive program. Well, it's been brilliant to hear so much agreement and alignment today. Some really interesting answers from everyone. I know, Minister Knops, you have to leave us, and in a moment we'll be joined by Marta Arszowska-Tomowska and Wietse van Ransbeek from Citizen Lab, where we'll be talking about quite similar themes about government transformation and adaptation.
Okay, I say goodbye and au revoir to everybody. Bye bye.
À bientôt.
Brilliant. Very good, and a very seamless transition there. As you will have seen appearing on your screen, we have Marta Arszowska-Tomowska, who's from the Prime Minister's office in Serbia, leading work on public administration reform. And we have Wietse van Ransbeek, founder of Citizen Lab, a CivTech citizen engagement platform working with governments around Europe. You will have heard in the last session that we were talking about that balance between trust, but also between efficiency and adaptation. Wietse, it'll be really fascinating to hear from you, given the work you do. How do you think governments can work to ensure that citizens are engaged with throughout every stage of crisis planning and crisis adaptation? When Minister de Montchalin is planning big wholesale reforms, how can we make sure that users and citizens are engaged with throughout?
Yes, thank you. I think first very important point that I wanted to make, and that has been already raised by the minister herself, is on the digital inclusion. That's something definitely to stress. I'm not going to the rest than already covered, but otherwise I would definitely say this has been an opportunity, or what we have seen is that governments, as they were still processing with their big projects, they were scratching their heads on like, how do we need to organize now, as we cannot have those traditional physical meetings anymore. And it was quite fascinating, I must say, because what we have done is we've worked with the cities to actually see how would you like to substitute those traditional meetings. And what we've done is we've set up a module at Citizen Lab for online workshops to actually still have those traditional meetings, those roundtables, those citizen workshops, but then in an online environment. And that also brings us to a question of what is digital democracy going to be like tomorrow? The internet has always been used for, I would say, more idea collection and voting. That's something that went very well. But the real human-to-human, face-to-face conversation, that's something that we've always considered for the offline. And that's that is now stress-tested and that is challenged. And I think that's something very interesting for us to think about, that digital citizen participation is not only about asynchronous posting and commenting, but can also be a tool to bring people together, people from all over Europe, perhaps all over the municipality, all over the country, and that we can be connected that way. So that is, I think, one specific innovation that we have seen during COVID that is very interesting to take along with us for the future. But then to answer your question on like what are some other ingredients that we need to take into account, what we have seen as real success factors in citizen participation are those four actually. First of all, the transparency on the process is really important, that you know where we are in the policy process. Also as a citizen, when can I expect feedback? It's very precious time that you invest as a citizen in citizen engagement, so you should know that you will get feedback and that you are going to be heard. That is a primordial condition, I would say. Then secondly, one of the other opportunities that digital participation offers is bringing more efficiency to the process. And indeed, people shouldn't be left out. We shouldn't have this absolute obsession with efficiency. But still, what we see is that once we collect hundreds and even thousands of inputs and ideas online, it takes a lot of time to process all those ideas. And one thing I believe is that natural language processing and text analytics is going to be a very big technology for governments to help with the summarization of all those inputs, giving reports to the governments, and that way also inform policymaking. Then a third thing that I want to stress, success factor, is that we shouldn't be doing only those top-down projects and consultations, but that we should also enable and empower more participation from the bottom up. Citizen initiatives is a very good example, but there are more things. And also next to that is we should engage citizens on the questions that really matter to them, that are meaningful. A citizen should always feel stake. So something that we've done over the past few months is lots of consultations and dialogues on the topic of Black Lives Matter, on whether statues in public space should be removed, yes or no. And then it isn't about voting yes or no, but it's about the argumentation, about the dialogue, listening to each other and mining those opinions, the diversity of opinions in the community. And then the last point I want to stress is the lessons learned between government. So one of the questions here was also, what are the key capabilities that we need in government? And even more than these or that hard skill, I would say it's about mentality of curiosity, learning from each other. And I think that is very important in public participation, to see how other municipalities are doing it or other governments are doing it, and come together to those best practices.
That's really fascinating. And you mentioned there a sort of modern manifestation of a classic part of democracy, which is that often it's not the yes or no, but it's the feeling of being heard and of being involved and being consulted. That's the most important thing. Really interesting to hear. Marta, thank you so much for joining us. It would be brilliant to hear a bit about some of the reform and transformation efforts you've been leading in Serbia. And again, with that principle of trust and accountability at the heart of it.
Well, this was really useful. Let's say, even it was an intense struggle. It was a time of remarkable human accomplishment, and this is what we've seen during the crisis, that we can use all the building blocks that we have done before, and then to build up on them to have even better public services or even better cope with the crisis. So there have been many efforts that we have done in the Serbian government in order to, provide the first line, let's say, the essential services. But then there was a huge co-creation to continue on what Wietse was talking about. So we have seen the power of crowdsourcing and mobilization of the entire human potential in the society, because everyone offered even to contribute. So we turn to our citizens and to our businesses and to our scientific communities, and they of course helped us to draw the best possible decisions. So many great examples were done. So some of them used the data-driven decision making. So this is why we really needed to have crowdsourced many data and implement some of the data analytics, so we could have adopt the best solutions. Obvious were in the healthcare, in designing the best economic support interventions, in the so literally we have done all together, and we use the building blocks that we have, the foundation that we have before. And yes, we had a strong foundation, and that was really important. Otherwise, we couldn't use the potential of data and the technology if we don't have the systems and the digital government, let's say, set up in advance.
Really interesting. We have a question from the audience, which first I'll ask to Minister de Montchalin, and then next to you, Mark, which is how do we get the right balance between speed, which is the sort of key word we've heard over and over again, and following the right proper process. Things like procurement, I think, is the best example of where things can be a bit too slow. But we do want to make sure that, in 5-10 years' time, when we look back on the decisions we made during this period, that they were, robust and accountable. I'd love to hear your views on that balance.
Well, I think it's the key and the core of the complexity of our jobs as transformators. That once you say, I will do something, half of the stakeholders you talk to is why it has not been done yet, meaning tomorrow. And you have also legitimate question on, okay, but can you explain why you want to do this? And the question of the purpose. Why are we doing what we plan to as a transformation? And on this front, I think the key is to be very, very clear and steady on the strategy, on the objectives, on the outcomes we are looking for, and to consultate, to speak, to listen on the objective, the outcome, and the strategy. Then after, the implementation phase can be fast, and you can have then speed, because you are not in a process where every time you move, every time you decide, every time you act, you have to re-explain why you're doing it. My role is to have this narrative and this shared narrative on why we think today the French government must organize differently, must act differently, must provide a different service to people. And on this front, yes, we need to confront, to explain, to listen, to consultate. And this is the objective, the outcome, and the strategy. But then after, and I can tell you this conversation has been going on and on, so we're not in a field where it's totally new. Then after, implementation can go fast. In this discussion phase, we had two experiences in France that I want to share because I think they can be of inspiration to potentially other countries. As you know, we had a movement, a social movement named the Yellow Vests, coming from more rural areas 18 months ago. And the way we thought to come to a more agreement on the protests and remarks being done by these people was to listen to them and organize what we call the great debate, the Grand Débat National. And this was an exercise where in 1/3 of all city town halls of the country, at least once, people were having a session without any discrimination in terms of background, training, a very flat organization with topics to be discussed, to be framed, but a total freedom on the way you then went to give answers. And this debate was very bottom up, helped us to reframe, to reorganize our priorities as a government, and also to use different words sometimes to better explain what we were doing, because sometimes we had huge misunderstandings. Typically, going digital was understood as leaving people behind and getting away from places. And typically, this idea of having single houses where all the public services were offered was reshaped after this debate. The second exercise we've undertaken, which is I think a global innovation, was regarding climate change, where we have also, as digital, a big questioning in society on why we're doing it. Are we going too fast? Are we going too slow? Is it inclusive or not? Is it creating divisions in society? And we had a process named a citizen convention, where we picked up randomly 150 citizens from the whole country, retirees, students, people with a lot of academic background, people having more handy jobs, a framing of a representative set of citizens with no special background in environmental transition, then trained by experts, and they put out more than 200 proposals for reform. And this was very important because they are now those invited to speak about why we need to do some choices, why we need to do some reforms, and they can also reflect the complexity of the decision making, saying, it's not just the government which is not willing to do this or that, but it's also because, in fact, when we looked at this problem as citizens, as normal people from the streets, we realized it was complex. These are two experiments, which are democratic experiments in a way, that we have been undertaking in the last 18 months, which for me have to be continued, evaluated, but give a sense of how we can discuss much more about our objective and strategy, and then be able to go faster on implementation.
You're right. Really, really inspirational stories. And I think if I'm correct in saying, goes back to your earlier point, which was that they were both supported by leading French startups, Cap Collectif and Open Source Politics, which again is why proper engagement of all of the different stakeholders here is so important.
Yes, and I can add one thing. Because it was helped and managed by startups, non-governmental organizations, and the whole framing of the debate was done externally, we had a greater trust in the exercise, which was not being seen as a totally manipulated exercise from central power seeking support in society. What came out from the debate was presented in a very open source way, totally transparent. We have now academics working on the content which was extracted from all these meetings all across the country. And this was key for the trust in the exercise and the recommendations that came out.
Really, really interesting point. And Mark, same question really, which is, as you've been doing work with public authorities in Europe, have you seen a change in their speed and adaptiveness? And do you think that they're still balancing proper due process with that increased speed and adaptiveness?
So really interesting examples there from Minister de Montchalin around creating dialogue. Let me talk about speed for a moment. And let me give you an example of one thing that we did with a French organization called Miracle, a 9-year-old organization in the e-commerce space. We created a platform called StopCovid19.fr, which was a platform launched to enable healthcare providers to access supplies of personal protective equipment early on in the pandemic, and this was launched within 2 days. It was launched really, really quickly. Now, situations like that where you need to get life-saving supplies to healthcare professionals in healthcare settings, everyone would say that speed is absolutely critical in those cases, and that was a great example completed in France. On the proper process, I think once government agencies have seen the benefits of efficiencies from going digital, and once citizens have experienced the benefits of digital services, the improved experience, personalization that comes from gathering more and more information on what citizens need in a responsible way, in a transparent way, they won't want to go back. And one of the things I admire most from the last 6 months of this pandemic is the speed that governments and government agencies have been able to move. And I have every confidence that organizations will build on the progress that's been made. None of us would wish to be in this situation, but the progress that's been made is really admirable.
I totally agree with you there, Mark. Marta, is there anything that you've done or you've overseen which you're really proud of in terms of speed? We heard Mark there talking about standing up a service in 2 days. Have you seen great speed and swiftness from the Serbian government?
Well, there were many that were done really fast, but one of the things that I might present now is the call of the Innovation Fund that we launched in the first few days of the crisis, almost possibly the first in Europe, if we can measure in that way. So we said, okay, we have this situation. We don't have, let's say, equipment enough. We don't have solutions. We don't have ideas almost how to cope, because we know that we have to provide the essential services, but there was not enough, neither equipment, neither ideas. So we said, okay, we are going to invite the community, and then we launched this call, let's say, on day 3 of the emergency state. And then we gave them like 7 days to receive solutions. 300 solutions were received. It was impressive. And then we picked them, and the solutions that were really scalable quickly. And then after 1 month, we received the first Serbian ventilator, which is really impressive, and then good high-tech equipment for disinfection or some messaging systems. So this was really great. Another example would be a volunteering platform. So that was done in a day 1, and then we have collected inputs from volunteers that would like to help the elderly people for their daily needs. So there were really great examples of let's say, mobilization and some good solutions that came out of the crisis. The speed was really crucial, and the fact that everyone was really wanted to contribute, that helped us, get the best possible solutions.
Really interesting, really inspiring story again. Vica, we've heard a bit talking about how important it is for all different public authorities, both Prime Minister's offices, central government, but also local authorities as well, to make sure that the citizens feel truly engaged and listened to. As government is becoming a more important part of our lives, as Minister Knops said, are you starting to see a sort of shift in the types of authorities that are looking to engage with their citizens, and maybe seeing that broaden out?
Well, yeah, absolutely. We were quite impressed to see how quickly also governments responded to the fact that they had to go digital. I can remember in the first weeks just setting up webinars and giving trainings, how many people from government were interested. So it's not only about the largest cities, although I think they had the resource to be more quickly reorganized internally. And also following up on what Marta just said, we have seen, I think, three kind of waves here during the crisis when it comes to participation and the reaction of local governments. So it was the first wave, and it was really the first days, the first weeks. There was about crisis communication. There was about setting up solidarity platforms and coordinating volunteering. Then the second wave was more, all right, this is going to become the new normal. So what do we do about this? How can we actually bring those participatory activities online? And then I think what was most important there is the training and the reorganization. And now we're in the third wave of thinking how the post-COVID society is going to look like, how we're going to embed also those new innovations in the new way of working. And I'm pretty sure that things such as town hall meetings, to give just one example, that is something that traditionally was always done in a building on a Tuesday night. Now the push towards digital makes that those town hall meetings are live streamed, are more interactive, that citizens can participate in this. So I do believe that we're definitely going to see a push towards more digital engagement, and that it's going to come with more transparent and democratic policy making.
Really interesting. A question I think for both Minister de Montchalin and Marta. I'm fascinated to think about the sort of how different governance structures can affect our ability to transform at scale. Across Europe, we have all sorts of different ways of structuring our government. As I was saying at the beginning to Minister Knops, the Dutch gemeenten sort of present a specific type of governance challenge. I wonder, both of you, first Minister de Montchalin, after Marta, how do we make sure that really good governance from the centre gets down to the local level, gets down to where people actually live their lives?
Well, in the recovery package, I'm putting money to pay local authorities to use digital tools developed by the state. And this is a way to reach scale. There are two things we are trying to push really forcefully. One is a single identification system named France Connect. It's an aggregator of identity. It's not a purely e-identity, but it's a way for people to connect with a single identity. It's the counterpart of your connect with Facebook. Well, we prefer to have an open source connection system, which is not the Facebook one to log into a public service, but we have developed this. It's now used by million French on a very regular basis. And we know that we have 25 million French who created an account. So, but we have to push them to use it more. And it will be used more if you can use it in more and more services, including public service delivered by local authorities. The second thing I'm pushing at scale is API, in particular with our tax system, because we keep asking people what is their income, how much taxes they pay, to define the social support we want to provide to them, also at the local level. And here again, I'm paying local authorities with the recovery package for them to implement and deploy these solutions that have proved very efficient for the state and that we want now to push.
Well, I see it as a two-way road. So yes, bottom-up solutions and ideas were really crucial, but then again, based on the roots and based on analytics of what has been done on a local level, we have to design a top-down, let's say, policies. We, as I said before, so the crowdsourcing is something that came out as out of this crisis. It's something that we can use the power of it, basically. So we have figured out now that instead of the Office for the ICT and e-government, who is the government body responsible for e-government, designing the, let's say, e-government services for all the agencies, we have come to a solution that we are going to prepare a wizard for e-government services, at least for creating the forms at the first level, so we don't have any paper form anymore. So we are going to use it like, you know, a tool, so they can create their own, civil servants can create, using those wizards, can create forms and create public services, you know, in the layers, in a transactional level, because we are going to give them building blocks that are needed for this, and all the registers which are already on our interoperability platform. But we can, you know, leverage on the power of 100,000 public servants to design services for the government. So these are some things that we are, you know, planning to do in the next phase. Of course, there are many different initiatives that we're working on. The most important thing and the beauty, and I see it as a silver lining of the pandemics, is the innovation, and then the bureaucrats became even entrepreneurs. So even digital entrepreneurs. So we've seen in the government that everybody who was from different reasons opposed to digitalization or not ready to adopt the digitalization, now since there were no counters and no physical contact, everybody is not only for the digitalization, but excited about the digitalization, and they would like to contribute. So we are using this momentum and trying to extend it as from a sprint to marathon, so we can basically digitalize the government services and the entire society, basically to walk through the complete digital economy.
Very interesting. And your answer there had some similarities with Minister de Montchalin's, which was the best way is to empower them with common tools and services across government to really reach scale. Well, we're out of time, sadly, but thank you so much to all my panelists. Really fascinating conversation and insights. And I think I've left here with some enthusiasm for as Marta said, the bureaucrats have become entrepreneurs. So hopefully we can see some sustainable long-term change coming out of the crisis. Thank you very much to all of my panelists.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.